Okay, so today we're going to work with the four language skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And in, in the literature, we will find it divided into two types, which are the receptive skills and the productive skills. Now, this is a very traditional way of, classifying four language skills, but it's the system that has been mostly cited by most authors. And reading and listening are ranked as receptive skills, speaking and writing are ranked as productive skills. And it's quite traditional, like I said, and it still works if we analyze all of what is involved in each of these skills. Now, the big question is, why do we teach receptive skills? Well, definitely to help learners develop the necessary skills to understand and interpret spoken or written materials. So we want them to be able to understand when something is said to them, or they listen, and when they read. And many take reading for granted, I feel, that they think that just reading is something simple, and it's really not, because you have to really absorb and ingrain the information that is being offered. In listening, we say that it is a two-way street because it involves speech and sound and the receiver. So we can't neglect the receiver. When we are producing, whenever we produce speech, we need to remember that somebody will listen and somebody will receive. There is a receiver on the other end. So these are the three main points that are important to take into account when you produce for a receiver: initiating sound, speaking categories, tones, intonations, and accents. Now, the receiver will process, will relate to meaning, and will react according to what he listens. He'll react similar to music sometimes. What he listens can make him sad, can even change his mood, and their mood can be influenced by what they hear. So initiating sound is really, it relates to sound. So it's when the air is expelled from the lungs. Now, there are initiating sounds like you have the bee, bat, bug. So you can see that the air, it comes from your lung. You also have clusters like blow, right? So BL. So these are what we call initiating sounds because they come at the beginning of the words and the air will be expelled. Now, the five main different types of speech are informative, demonstrative, persuasive, entertaining, and special occasion speeches. And when we teach listening, the big key is to show our students these distinctions because it will prepare them for the different types of listening, principally for beginners. So informative speeches, this is when the audience is learning something. The purpose is to teach the audience. So we're talking about lectures, training, demonstrations. But demonstrative speeches, it's kind of like an arm coming from informative speeches, but it combines more the aspect of verbal and visual aids. So it really is with the intention of educating. So how to tie a perfect necktie, how to create beautiful coffee designs. So these are more demonstrative speeches. Nowadays, YouTube is full of these demonstrative speeches. And you don't really have to be an expert to do a demonstrative speech. Persuasive speeches, these are when the speaker will try to influence, will try to shed light and influence the audience. So it's very common to see this in political rallies, in many, activists. So for example, animal activists, when they're giving a speech to a group of meat eaters and they are trying to convince them that meat is really unhealthy. So these are speeches that you try to influence your audience. Entertaining speeches, once again, these are meant to be informal and they happen in everyday life. And they can happen at birthday parties or weddings. So for example, the best man's speech at a wedding or the principal's speech before a school talent show. So they're meant to be entertaining, they're meant to capture the audience and amuse the audience. Special occasion speeches, they're meant to be really brief, and they're meant to have, it's a combination of the entertainment speech with a special occasion. So they kind of like overlap sometimes, the entertaining and the special occasion. It's most of them are not necessarily prepared. They're kind of like more spontaneous. So these are the main types of speeches that we teach our students to listen to. Now, tones, intonations, and accents. So what is the function of intonation and tones? Well, for linguistics, intonation is the fluctuation of one's voice as they speak. So intonation can go up, intonation can go down. We avoid having we help our students avoid to have that monotone, and teaching them how to go up in specific question types, and then intonation goes down. Sometimes they tend to reduce the voice and not really, let's suppose, put down the intonation. They think that down intonation means to lower your voice. So that's something that we really work with, at least at initial English 1, 2, and 3 basic levels. The tone is when you express emotion and even one's attitude. According to the speaker's feelings, he can express that by tone. Accents, there are two types of accents. The accent is the manner of pronunciation peculiar to a particular individual, a location, or a nation. So this is really, it started to grow after sociolinguistics also began to gain space in linguistics, because in a country, for instance, Canada or the USA, where English is kind of like considered the mother tongue, it can be spoken in so many different ways, the same word with a different accent. And then there are accents of non-native speakers, which are the result of the speaker's native language influencing when they speak another language. Now, when it comes to speech classifications, that's another important information to help our students understand the different types of speeches. The same way there are different genres in reading, there are different speech classifications. So there's the monologue and the dialogue. And the monologue is most of the time planned. When it's unplanned, it will definitely have redundancy, and it will sound unprepared and unplanned. It will sound repetitive. When you have a monologue, it's important not to have long stretches, of silence. You have to flow. That's the intention of a monologue. The dialogue, they're going to be interpersonal, mostly focused on social, activities. Transactional, that's mostly when the information is factual. Dialogues can also be unfamiliar. So then in this case, when you're going to work with unfamiliar topics, this is when you add a glossary or you add references to your student. And familiar, when the subject is known. Now, second language learners, they need to pay attention to factual information, because factual information, when it comes to the transactional, it's going to inform them the main topic, it's going to inform them the main concept. So that's why factual information, when we're teaching students, it's helpful for them to become confident. Factual information is easier to identify than social, because social, it's going to be covered and full of plenty of collocations that may not be easy for a non-native speaker to identify. While factual information, the usage of words, it's more denotative and not, it's more according to the meaning that they will see in the dictionary. So it makes more sense to them. And that's how we begin. After they've become confident with factual information, we slowly introduce interpersonal and social listening tasks. Now, if we consider an English book, all of these, interchange, new directions, all of these. There's a student coming in. I think Mali had problems with the internet. There we go. Mali, are you okay now? Hello? I think everything is fine. Okay, well, moving on.
Yeah,
So,
I come back here.
yeah, Mali? Okay, then good to have you back. Now, the kinds of listening performances. So, when we are teaching our students to listen, all of these tasks are included. But going back to the idea of the English books, so those English books, interchange, new directions. If you start off with like book 1, 2, 3, have you realized that they're all very similar? Like unit 1, unit 2, if you compare, regardless if it's an interchange, a new directions, or American, there's that other American file. Have you realized the first units and most of the units, how they correspond and they have the same topics? How do you think that they select these topics to teach? Why do we teach days of the week, numbers, right at the beginning, introductions, and then verb to be? Why do you think that these are frequently the first units of English books? Olga?
Well, those are kind of basic things that everyone needs to know from the start, on the one hand. On the other hand, students will have the opportunity to apply that kind of knowledge in their life. So they will feel that connection. They're not just learning something in a book, they are learning something that they can apply in their real life.
There you go. So when we're dealing with course design, that's called high frequency usage. So studies have been conducted to identify what are high frequency usage topics to begin teaching them so that they can start to feel independent. And like you said, that they feel that what they are learning is useful for them to apply. So it's according to the high frequency of the usage of language. And the verb to be is that kind of verb that you just can't survive English without knowing the verb to be. That's why the insistence of affirmative, interrogative, negative, and so on. So yeah, that's it. You said it in a different way, but it's exactly that. Well done. So when we're teaching the listening, we're going to look into the types of listening that our student is going to be looking at. So reactive listening, this is listening to the surface. So that is that big general concept. They have to identify specific information. How many apples were in the basket, even though there's a big, dialogue around, but the real idea here is for them to identify how many apples were in the basket. The intensive is when they have to focus on certain components. That's very common in the gap filling exercises that we give them. So they have to focus to identify what was said before and after certain words. The responsive is when they have to respond to what they heard. And that can be in several ways. They can answer quizzes about the listening. They can answer multiple choice. So the selective is when they're scanning the material. The material here is like a video, a recording, for specific information. Sometimes selective and reactive can be confused. The reactive is listening to very superficial that will easily pop out. So numbers, days, names, while the selective, they are for specific information that may not be so superficial, that they may have to, be a little bit more proficient in their listening skills. Now, the extensive is developing a top-down global understanding of what the recording says. So this is very common when we do activities of retelling. So the student listens to a recording and they have to retell what they heard in their own words or using, main words from the recording or from the video. And interactive, it includes all of these skills, and then they will listen to debates, to conversations, to role plays. So it's students actively participating then in discussion and debates, and other students listening to them and responding to them. So then it's the last moment of listening when finally they're able to listen and participate. Because we know that listening and speaking, they correspond with each other. One is productive and one is receptive, but they both interact. So our main goal, our ultimate goal, is to make our students interactive listeners. But they go through these steps: reactive, intensive, responsive, selective, and extensive. Can you think of an activity that would be responsive that we do with our students? A responsive activity?
Like multiple choice test?
Yes, multiple choice, that's it. And
True,
when we
false?
true, false, there you go, excellent. So they have to give immediate response to the recording or to the information in the video. When we ask our students to spell, would that be a speaking or a listening task? Or a combination?
Would you please repeat your question?
Yes. So when we ask students to spell a word, so you're working with your students and you say, please spell the word Monday. So would that be a listening or a speaking task or a combination?
I think a combination.
Yeah, it's the interactive, right? Because they have to listen and understand the word in order for them to spell. So this would be a simple interactive task. But in order for them to reach that, they have to focus on the word. Even if it's one word, they have to focus on the component that is that one word. So they focus on one component and then they participate by spelling. So it's one of the simplest interactive activities that we do with our students in terms of listening and speaking. Now, when we are dealing with teaching listening comprehension, because not only do we want them, the first steps is when they listen and they can make out like gap filling and so on, but when they reach the point where they're doing the extensive, they also have to comprehend. So in order to do so, they have to develop interactive skills of listening and comprehension competence. They have to be competent in listening, understanding what they have heard. So not only identifying words, they have to be able to put the words together and extract meaning from full sentences. In order to encourage and to, bring our students to participate in this type of activity, we have to try to select tasks that appeal to them. And that seems to be quite difficult lately. Principally if you're dealing with teenagers, right? It's very hard to get them excited about something. It's easier to get a mature group excited than a group of teenagers excited. But anyhow, what could excite them? Mostly real world tasks and information that they feel is not really teaching them anything. They really don't want to be taught. They want to feel that the information is interesting. They don't want to necessarily learn when they're listening. So sometimes podcasts of real crime scenes, it's incredible how this intrigues them and they like listening to this type of podcast. If you try to give them a Shakespeare poem, they're not going to feel interested in listening to a Shakespeare poem. But if you play for them a podcast of a real crime investigation, that will appeal to them. Also, it will, as they feel appealed and they feel attracted, they will put more effort into it. And we will encourage the development of the listening strategies. So we can help them too. We can give them pre-tasks. So for example, keywords. If we're dealing with a video, nonverbal cues. So we can ask them to interpret facial expressions. We can also ask them to ask questions if they don't understand, and seeking for clarification. That is something that, as I said, when it comes to the crime podcasts, they really become curious and they ask the meaning of words, they ask for clarification because it's very specific vocabulary sometimes. And that will raise their interest. Now, there are two types of tasks that we use with them: the bottom up and the top down. The bottom up, these are activities such as dictation, close listening, the listening with the gap filling, multiple choice questions after text. The text that we refer to here, it is the recording or the video, and similar activities that require the process of input. They have to receive the input, they need the input in order to produce and develop the activity. The top-down processing, they need background knowledge somehow in order to develop it. And we can help them once again. And this is when we can offer images, or we can offer a glossary, or we can do a warm-up activity discussing and asking about experience in this. For example, the other day I was working with the students and they had to discuss charts and results in charts. So I started off by putting images on the board, and they were looking at that and saying, okay, so these are charts. That was easy to get, but what do they extract from a chart then? How do they interpret the information, the comprehension of that? So that was mostly a reading task, but that afterwards I played the recording of a business presentation, because it was a business English group, a business presentation using the data from the graphs. So that would be a top down. So in order for them to really understand the whole presentation, they needed the visual aid. Without visual aid, it would be much more difficult for them to understand and comprehend the information. So this task here, I would like you to look at it and tell me, is it a bottom down or top down listening task?
Bottom up.
Sorry?
I think bottom up. They
Bottom
hear
up?
and yeah.
Okay. And what leads you to believe that this is it's correct, Mali, okay, but what leads you to believe that it is a bottom up task?
They hear a piece, yeah, and then after hearing the piece, they should actually choose the words that they have heard and number the words in the order. It means that at first they have input, and then after having input, they actually do the exercises. Something comes from outside. There is input.
There you go. So there's input and there's no need of background information, right? It's given to them. Excellent. So yes, this is a bottom up activity. And trust me, it's very efficient. And this will involve the students because they see a purpose to their listening. So they know that they will listen and they will have to number the words. So when they feel that there's a purpose to the task, that also challenges them, and challenging them is one way of encouraging them to participate. Now, when it comes to reading and listening, which are the receiving skills, the receptive skills, we just looked into listening now, and the next step we're going to look into is reading. Now, in general, do you feel that you're a strong reader? Olga, would you say that you're, a strong reader? Do you read frequently?
I used to read a lot, and sometimes I do it from time to time. I don't know, like as a child, reading was the only way for me to discover new worlds because we didn't have the internet at that time. And that is actually what made me fall in love with English because I read A Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Do you know that story? As a
Yes.
child, it was my absolutely favorite. And so I was dreaming about visiting all those places. And as a child, the only way of doing so for me was learning English because I thought that if I learned English, I would be able to visit all those places I made up in my mind. So I really
Wonderful.
loved reading. And now I do it from time to time. I do it for pleasure mostly. And now, being a student here, I do it for studies as well. Well, as a teacher, obviously, but I didn't even perceive it as reading, when I had to go through lots of materials for my classes. It wasn't even reading for me. It was just part of my job, part of the preparation strategy. But, well, for me, reading is something I do for pleasure mostly. That is how I perceive it. So, and
Yeah.
uh, I guess so. And obviously, when I go through all the materials on Canvas, I try to understand. It's a little bit different for me. It's like when I read through it, I try to understand, make some associations. So, and then I can remember it that way.
But do you feel that you read less than you did in the past nowadays?
Uh,
For pleasure,
Probably,
even? Probably, right?
probably,
Yeah,
yeah,
we're going to
probably.
get there. Celeste, do you feel that you read as much as you did, or do you feel that your habit has changed?
I would be classified as a voracious reader. I
Voracious.
always have 2 or 3 books on the go at the same time. I usually have some kind of documentary, more dry material. I have usually a fantasy novel or something else like a biography. And I've always done that. I've always read that way. Um, it goes in rhythms. So there are times of years where I read less, but I always have a lot of books on the go. And just for Olga, my first book when I was 12 was Lord of the Rings. And I read it 6 times. I was
Oh,
so in love
wow.
with it.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, you
Yeah,
are definitely
I was a little,
voracious
I was a bit
reader.
of a nerd. I was a bit
Yeah.
of a nerd, but yeah. So I love reading. I read all the time. And the act of reading an actual book. Um, I love the
Yeah.
act of reading, smelling the book, turning the page. So yeah,
Yeah. So it's really old school, which we don't see so frequently anymore, unfortunately.
exactly.
That's it. But even though you're a voracious reader, do you feel that somehow you have, you know, put reading aside sometimes to watch a video, to, to change the time instead of reading, you find yourself, okay, today instead of reading, I'm going to watch a video, I'm going to look at a how to prepare a recipe.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think there's a variety of things. I don't always read. Um, I might read before bed or things like that. But yeah, for sure. I look at a lot of YouTube videos or how to's or
How to.
podcasts. I love podcasts. I'm a painter,
Yes.
so I listen to podcasts while I paint. So yeah, there's a quite a variety that I didn't when I was younger. Well, they weren't available. So
That's it. They weren't available, right?
yeah.
Ali, what about you? Thank you, Celeste. Are you a voracious reader, or do you feel that you've also kind of like transferred your
No,
reading to other habits?
in the past, really, I was a bookworm. I loved to read for hours, but now I love to listen to different podcasts and audiobooks, and I like audiobooks. And I think that they are informative and they help me in saving my time. When I drive, at the same time, I listen to the audiobook, and I think that I can save my time through listening to the books rather than
That,
reading them.
but that comes after a phase that you have already been a reader, right? So all of you, Olga, Celeste, Maline, me, we were readers. And now we're transferring sometimes. Like I said, we listen to an audiobook, to a podcast, and so on. But what happens with the learner that we have in the classroom? Is he a reader? Did he learn really the reading, or did he already kind of like dive into the podcast world, the audio world? Olga?
Well, with my students, I found that if they're talking about teenagers or university students, I had initially they are not readers. Well, 80% of them, probably 90% of them are not readers. But what can get them to read is, for example, they play a video game, like The Witcher. Oh, a video game! I love it. Oh, there is a TV show called The Witcher. Oh, I have watched that. What can I do next? Oh, there is a book called The Witcher. Oh, actually, it's a whole saga, a series of books. I will read that. So they can become readers, but they need to be really motivated. So intrinsically motivated to do that. Because if you just tell them read, it will be like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
will if I have to. But if they are not intrinsically motivated, it's not working 100%.
That's it. So that we seem nowadays, because we always have to see who is our audience. So if we're going to teach, like Malish, she teaches teacher students who intend to develop research, to write a thesis, it's a different audience. When we're English teachers to, classrooms, I would say regular classrooms, we have a different audience nowadays than we did like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even. And we have to adapt to that. So it's like a backtrack we go. Like you said, they play video games. Oh, The Witcher. The Witcher, there's a movie. Oh, but it comes from the book. Okay, so it's like a backtrack. And then they will read, definitely. And we have to teach them how to read. Do you have that feeling too? They don't know how to read, in fact. They read, but they're not reading at the same time. They're just like looking at the words, but they're not putting them together as naturally as they do when they listen. So that's when it comes in, the reading skills. So we have the academic reading tasks and efficient reading strategies. And the efficient reading strategies, we really have to put them in place to motivate and to help our students become readers. So pre-reading strategies are one of the best ways nowadays, I feel, to grasp their attention somehow. So it can be by a series, by even a manga. They love mangas, depending the age group, and university students in technology, for example. So you have to find something that is attractive. Then you have to have during reading strategies, somehow develop strategies that they will have to respond to continue reading so that they don't feel demotivated. So you have the pre-reading strategies, then the during reading strategies so that they continue connected to reading and they just don't give up. One way to do this is to respond to comprehension questions. So as they read chapter by chapter, there can be debates in the class, quizzes, and similar. Now, activities such as IELTS reading tasks, this becomes a little bit more tricky because not only do they have to read and comprehend, but they're under the pressure of a timer. So when you're dealing with reading for high-stake proficiency tests, for example, that's a different ballgame, and you really have to be prepared to deal with the students who still don't know how to read, but they need to take IELTS and they need like a 7. So you have to really then go to the efficient reading strategies. Something that is very important for college students are the authentic texts that they must read. And many of them, they went through high school without really being motivated to read appropriately, without having to read for comprehension. and how to integrate all of this content in your lesson plan. So, I mean, you have to integrate pre-reading strategies, during reading strategies. Mali, I had problems again. She's back. So all of this we have to think of when we're going to make a lesson plan. And very soon, one of your tasks will be to prepare a lesson plan. And you will have to do a reading lesson plan, among others. So all of this will be very helpful for you to prepare your lesson plan. Now, efficient reading strategies goes with skimming, guessing the meaning of a word, the meaning of the word from the text, implied meaning, the purpose of reading. So why are they reading? Are they reading for academic purposes? Are they reading for leisure? What are they reading? And teaching them how to do silent reading even. So that's another skill that they're really not used to. Once again, I'm focusing on that group of students that most of us will walk in the classroom and find there, teenagers, young adults. That's the audience that I'm thinking of. Now, the different genres, it's important for them to also be familiar with the different genres. And I feel that when we deal with authentic material, when we start with little things like menus or, announcements, greeting cards, so this will attract them to, because they will see usefulness to it. They will understand that reading this kind of genre can be helpful for them to communicate and to, get by. So dealing with fiction, novels, letters, nowadays mostly emails. Now, identifying the purpose in reading. Once again, this is our job to show them the purpose. They're not going to instantly and naturally identify it. So we can help them also at the same time when they're doing reading, help them and show them how this can be helpful for their speaking, for their fluency, because they gather information related to vocabulary, to sentence structure. So all of this can be helpful for them. And even with little tips like having games, like I said, of short vowel sounds, while you take a paragraph and you ask them to identify short vowels, long vowels, that can be helpful because they will see in the reading that there is also a different purpose that can lead them to speak better. And most students, one of their biggest desires is to speak better. Silent reading. The good thing about silent reading is that they don't have to pronounce the words. So to a certain extent, they feel less exposed. And they can understand what they're reading better. So doing silent reading in the classroom, it may have a bad feeling for us teachers. I feel as if I'm like kind of useless when I assign silent reading to my students, because I try to understand what's my role. It's like teachers were always active, and it's hard for us to understand that sometimes we have to sit put, and principally now with the active methodologies that we have to get them to really, work their way through tasks. But silent reading is an activity that once they get the hang of it, and as long as it's not too extended, they will like it, because then in sequence you will have activities that will challenge them. And challenge is motivating. Now, skimming and scanning, these are two types of reading strategies that we teach them, and it's lifelong skills. It's lifelong. Once they understand that they will use this when they're going to read a menu, when they're going to read, news, that they just want the headlines, and if they intend to take any kind of tests in the future, either proficiency tests or university tests. So these are two skills that are helpful and useful for lifelong. Now, once again, helping them see that reading can teach them language without being boring. So you can play games such as have them find words with prefixes, have them find words with suffixes, distinguish between literal and implied meaning, help them identify, markers. So firstly, secondly, logical sequence words. So you can list these on the board and help them and ask them to find this and ask them, what is the function of these words? So not only will they read, but you can interact reading with grammar. Not that boring grammar, but grammar in an interactive way, context in the context. And this will help them. So they will learn vocabulary with prefixes, suffixes, spelling. They will learn sentence structure, identifying connectors, identifying conjunctions, and other, categories that you can come up with. Words with capital letters. Now, in Canvas, there's material that is very interesting and that you will need, and it will be part of your board exam. So there is lesson 1 from basics in reading and lesson 2 from challenges, which is the process and approach of academic English. And it illustrates the use of an article from a popular magazine for advanced level classes. So these 2 tasks, I recommend that you go to Canvas and you look at them and you understand the process. This is part of your board exam, and it will be helpful also for you to prepare your lesson plan that you will have as an assignment very soon. There is a video teaching reading in the English as a second language classroom. That's very helpful as well and informative. And Duffy is one book. It's available for you to download. The references, I have the link for you. And it brings, even though it's from 1993, it's not new, but some of the concepts, they haven't been, changed. Skimming and scanning is one of them. And even tasks such as asking them to look for unknown words in the dictionary can be challenging because they will learn a new way of learning vocabulary. Now, implications of reading strategy for teachers. So when it comes to teachers, we need to be prepared to teach reading. And these references here, I find them very helpful and informative in the sense that they illustrate how these strategies can be applied. So they bring the theory, research results, and also activities for you to apply. Once again, they're not new references, but some concepts you have to go back to the beginning in order to progress and understand the more contemporary ones. If you're not prepared and you're not knowledgeable of the basics of where the process started, it's more difficult for you to keep up, to understand the more contemporary theory, because all of these more modern theories, they use references from the basic concepts of reading strategies. So that's why these are recommended references. Now, when we do research to prepare classes, we're doing research, right? We're not really, like Olga said, suddenly it's part of the job. You're looking through material, you're searching for material, you're understanding the task. Mali? Hello? Oh, would you like to comment? Okay. Well, teaching reading is to help students develop as strategic readers. We want them to be able to be efficient and strategic readers. And in future, they can move forward in their academic life, in their professional life. So how should this teaching be carried out? Well, strategy instruction has been discussed, throughout. It's like throughout history, let's suppose. And TESOL is one way, has an approach that considers teaching reading to foreign language students using strategies that they do not have to go back to their mother tongue, avoiding translation, avoiding this relationship of English with the mother tongue. So that's why TESOL, the ongoing activities that you will see available in your Canvas, they use state-of-the-art reading strategies, as I said. But all of these reading strategies that I just mentioned, they go back and they are based on the basic concepts of reading: skimming, scanning, interpreting. So grammar, why is grammar important? Because once they identify a connector, they will understand the relationship between the ideas that the connector is connecting. So if they see a but, and trust me, it's not intuitive always. They can't really understand that the but is there to put together two contrasting ideas, or that a relative clause is the function is to refer back to an element and to add information. And if they don't know these basic concepts of grammar, their reading will not be comprehensive, because it's by applying and using this grammar that they are able to really interpret what is written. So that's why mixing and doing grammar activities with your reading will help your students be more strategic readers. They will identify a relative clause, and right away they'll know, oh, it's referring back to an element to add information. When it's a conjunction, it's putting two ideas together. When it's a marker, it's ordering, it's putting, order to elements. So all of this, we really have to teach them. It's not intuitive. And that's why when we do reading, we can integrate grammar lessons. Now, there is one big dilemma, and it is to adopt methods to teach, English as a second language. So Brown and Palinskar, for example, students are taught 4 reading strategies. For him, these are the 4 basic reading strategies: summarizing, predicting, clarifying, and asking questions. So when we're teaching our students, and when you read Brown and Palinskar, they have plenty of examples of what is summarizing. Summarizing, to a certain extent, is like retelling. Predicting, using the title, using topic sentences of each paragraph. Clarifying, using connectors, conjunctions, and asking questions. And that's when, as a reader, he will ask himself questions as he reads. So if he sees an information, what is the result? What is the consequence? So he wants to find a consequence. So he starts to ask himself questions such as, well, why is this important? What does this lead to? So these are the basic strategies to help your students identify information and become proficient and strategic readers. Now, in L2, in language, in the second language, students introduced these strategies that mostly in the past were used only in the first language. This is not naturally an English or foreign language teaching. Originally, these concepts, they came as first language strategies. And then through research, they identified that these strategies from first language can also be applied to second language. So that was quite, was a big revolution, because there was a time when we would say that strategies and methods for first language would not be accepted for second language teaching. And now we know that that's not always true. Through research, we have new findings. So effective instruction in strategic reading entails a number of classroom processes, and sometimes they may even overlap each other. So as I said, general strategy discussion, teacher modeling. So when the teacher is the model for them. So for read aloud, for example, or when you're asking them to identify grammar points, you start off doing the task with them. Student reading, analysis of strategies used by the teacher, by student when thinking aloud. So that's in the debates, and explanation and discussion of individual strategies. Some students will feel that the skimming is very helpful because they identify keywords quickly and they can have an overview of the text. Others may find it more difficult to run their eyes quickly and identify keywords. So also there will be the individual strategies. Once we teach them all that each student is so unique, they will adapt and adopt what they feel is more efficient for them. So when we organize our class activities, we have to reflect all of these processes. Most English books, they already cater these processes. We just have to identify, because when we identify the method behind the task, it seems that as a teacher, we teach more efficiently. So that's why it's important to identify the method behind each task, the strategy behind each task. So when you teach, it's more effective, your teaching. How to teach reading skills, there's also this video. And the next class, we're going to go into speaking. So today we'll wrap up with listening and reading. Next class, I'm going to bring a few challenges for you so that you can identify and, we can do some tasks and you can even copy and paste some of the tasks. Now, my question is, are you all in the WhatsApp group?
No, I'm not.
Yeah. Okay, then. So I'm going to stop the recording here because the content has been concluded. Here we go.
No.